of the free community workshops for college admissions. Part 1, we had an amazing welcome to today's college workshop on the personal statement. This is the third of 3 community workshops for students at Cons and your parents, so we know what it takes to get into college. College is not just about your GPA, and it's not just about your SAT. Everyone here, raise your hand if you want to apply to NYU. Raise your hand, look around. Everyone, raise your hand high if you get NYU. 8% rate. Both of your SAT teachers this weekend are going to NYU with that 8% admissions rate. So we have your college counselors who will be able to work with you in person. But everyone applying to NYU will have a 1500 score. So you have a selection করবে কাকে নেবে সবারই যদি 95 average থাকে সবাই যদি 1500 থাকে সিট তো বাড়ছে না কিন্তু আরো বারবার আমাদের we're going to have more and more applicants. So the applicant number went from like 50,000 to 80,000, and the number of seats has been the same. So we ask everyone to put your ringers on silent. I will start myself. Similar to a Netflix comedy special, this is being taped. So this won't be on Netflix, but we have students and teachers from all of our centers showing up. We have over 50 to 100 registrants. Ms. Sadia, we want to start off by recognizing all the leadership that went into today's college workshop. I want to thank our operations leaders and Mr. Farhan, Mr. Kazi, Mr. Tassim. So please give us a warm round of applause for all of our operations members. I'd like to ask you to join me and continue your applause for your SAT teachers and your local branch managers, please. We have one of our star-studded college counselors today. Ms. Sadia El is a graduate of Harvard College. She has led at least several college admissions workshops for Constitutorial this summer, along with her amazing co-counselor, Ms. Sabiha. Today, we'll talk about the personal statement. You don't need to take photos of what's happening. This will all be on YouTube for you all, so just pay close attention. If you want to take your phone, take some notes, you're more than welcome to. And Ms. Sadia, are you good to go? Should we turn the floor over to you?
Yeah, I am good to go. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for coming to our third workshop. I'm one of the college admissions counselor, like Ivan was saying. Sabiha is my other co-counselor, and she's not here today live with us, but she'll be leading the second part of this workshop. So before we get started with the personal statement, I just want to ask how many of you guys are applying to colleges this year, and how many of you have to write a personal statement? Can you raise your hand?
Raise your hand if you're applying to colleges.
Awesome. Okay. I couldn't see that well, but it looks like there are a lot. Okay. So why is your personal statement important? What do colleges want to see in an applicant? The University of Pennsylvania said that we read your words carefully, as they are yet another window into how you think, what you value, and how you see the world. Through your writing, we get a glimpse of what you might bring to our community, including your voice and creativity. Harvard University Admissions has said that we seek to identify students who will be the best educators of one another and their professors, individuals who will inspire those around them during their college years and beyond. So what is the personal statement? It's essentially a 650-word essay that should differentiate you from your peers. And your topic does not need to be grand, but needs to be something that is clearly meaningful to you, since you're choosing to write about this and sending it to all of your colleges. And one of the most important factors of the personal statement is to show growth. How have you overcome certain challenges? What characteristics do you want colleges to see and understand and take away from your personal statement? And for this, you need to channel your authentic voice, choose a topic that is special and unique, and show when you're writing. Don't just tell. We'll go through that in later on in this workshop. But yes, the most important thing is to show the admissions committee who you are and what you value about yourself and your experiences. All right, so what shouldn't you do in your personal statement? Don't use convoluted words. Don't use, don't get a thesaurus and try to add flourish to your language. The most simply written essays are usually the best because they're easy to digest, and they can show your thought process pretty clearly. Consider avoiding controversial topics. Even if you are passionate about certain topics, your reader might not share your viewpoint, and that could have an effect on your chances of admission. Avoid listing items like your grades and your transcript scores in your personal statement. That's what your transcript is for, and your personal statement is there to show who you are as an individual rather than, numbers. And of course, don't let anyone else write your essay. It's your personal statement, and it's also a violation of ethical standards if you let someone else write your essay. All right. So how many of you have had a chance to look at the Common App prompt? Okay. For those of you who haven't, let's read through some of them. They have 6 prompts that they give you, and then the last one is to write your essay on any topic of your choice. Some of them ask you to talk about something that's very meaningful to you, if it's a talent, your background, your identity. Another one, the second one, asks you to talk about a challenge, a setback, or a failure. A common theme among many of these is, again, the idea of growth. Whether it's a challenge or an obstacle that you faced in the realm of an extracurricular activity, or in growing up in your background or your identity, the most important thing is to show that you can overcome and persevere through your personal statement. Okay, so the brainstorming process. This is where, if you are applying this year, this is where you should be at this summer. If you haven't already looked at the prompts and if you haven't thought about what you want to write about, this is the perfect time to get started on that, because we do recommend completing your personal statement by latest September so that you have some time to work on your supplementals, which are equally important as your personal statement, especially if there are schools that you really want to get into. So before we dive into the brainstorming, we have a case study. I can read it out loud for you, and then I'm going to ask you guys to reflect on it. Like last time, Anwar is currently brainstorming what to write for his Common App personal statement and can only think of one thing: winning the homecoming football game. He has always been an athletic person and has played football for over 8 years. This past year, he starred as the quarterback of his high school football team and was proud at his winning moment during homecoming. He vividly remembers the adrenaline rush from that night and thinks he could perfectly capture it through his Common App piece. However, when he consults his peer about his idea, he responds, "Isn't that basic? Is Anwar's Common App essay ideas basic? Why or why not?" All right. So we have Cons Jackson Heights and Floral Park and the Ozone Park branch. Anyone wants to participate? We can start with Jackson Heights since we have the most number of people there. Do you think Anwar's Common App essay idea is basic?
I would say his idea is not basic because it truly shows who he is, and he could speak about like layers of his experience, not just one aspect. So if it shows who he is, then I think he's okay.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other thoughts, ideas?
I was thinking that like it is a little bit basic, but as long as like they show like what she said layers, like maybe why he felt so proud of himself, like if he had like any callbacks during his quote football career, you could write about that and how he improved himself slowly to lead to that point.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, I think you guys kind of hit on all the points. So if he's only writing about, the adrenaline rush of the game, it is basic and doesn't show much about who he is as a person. But if he can spin it the right way, he tells the story in a way that shows a lot of the different aspects of himself that he values a lot, that colleges might value a lot. That could work. But at the end of the day, it depends on how he's writing it. And there are other topics that he could potentially brainstorm about and see if those show a more unique story. So we have a list of some cliche topics that we'd say you should try to avoid. But as you guys were saying, at the end of the day, it is your story, and every experience is unique to yourself. And as long as you can talk about each of these experiences through specific examples, if you can take your reader through the emotions or place them in the scenario in itself with you, you can execute it really well for it to not be a cliche story. Some of the topics we say are very common that a lot of students talk about are, your extracurricular accomplishments or experiences, working hard in a challenging class. That's something I would say you should avoid because it focuses more on the academic side, and the admissions committee is already seeing the academic side of your application through through the transcript, through the SATs and the test scores and all of that. So this is your chance to show another part of yourself. Yeah, don't talk about somebody else in your essay. It should be about you. It should always connect back to you. And possible topics that a lot of people still talk about, like immigration and struggles with COVID-19 and the lockdown. Again, this comes back to how you're talking about these experiences. Yeah, so try to be as unique as possible. And right now is the time to brainstorm a lot. And we'll have charts later on in this workshop that you can use to pinpoint specific examples from your broader experiences that you can use in your supplemental essays and your personal statement. Okay, this is a mini workshop component. So we want to ask, what do you want to highlight about yourself? Let's think about 5 characteristics that are important aspects of yourself. And then maybe if you have time, write down an experience or an obstacle or a memory that is associated with each of those characteristics that you might be able to explore more. So take 2 to 3 minutes and just brainstorm 5 characteristics that you want to incorporate potentially in your personal statement. And we'll come back. All right. I hope you've had some time to think of a few of the characteristics you might want to talk about. For example, it could be resilience, curiosity, compassion, anything that you value about yourself that you think is important for the admission committee to know. Next, we'd recommend, taking some time to free write, but for the sake of time, right now we won't give you that time to free write, but when you get home, if you haven't thought of a personal statement topic, I would say go back to the characteristics that you did brainstorm and pick one of them and then take 5 to 10 minutes, put on a timer, and just write. Whatever comes to your mind, just write it all down. Don't worry about grammar, don't worry about structure, don't worry about anything. Just put down the content. And then from there, hopefully you can get something that you can use later on for your essay. Here are some more guiding questions to help you think of possible essay topics. Again, what's very important is that making sure that your topic and your essay shows qualities about yourself that relate to personal growth, that shows your ability to reflect on your experiences, humility, maturity, and yeah, so here are some more questions. What's an object that represents the people who raised you? How does your environment influence you? What's a bad habit that you've overcome? What's an image that you'll never forget? What's the toughest decision you've ever had to make? And then when are you most yourself? Okay, so the writing process. For the first draft, writer's block is normal, which is why we recommend free writing or flow charting, whatever helps you think, to just get the content down or get a lot of different topics on paper. Don't limit yourself to 650 word count. What's important is, again, to write as much as you can. And oftentimes it turns out that, your perfect first sentence might even be like somewhere in the middle of that first draft. And then again, you have to make time for major shifts. So if you start early on, you can, completely switch your personal statement topic. If you think of something over lunch the next day or a week later, you have time to make that big shift. So start early. It's never too early to start. So even if you are not applying to college this year, you can still think about what's meaningful to you. I'd recommend keeping a journal if you want, writing down anything that happens as you're living through high school, regular life that impacted you a lot. And you can, of course, reference that later on when you're applying. Okay, so we have a few case studies. Our first case study is a sample personal statement, and it's titled Lost in the Forest. It's sourced from @medreport.com, and we'll read it together. And as you're reading, I want you to think about what the writer does well, what could they do better, and what can you learn about the writer from this essay, if there's a distinct message. So this one. I'll start reading. I look into the forest, moss wet on my feet. There's fog everywhere. I can barely see the glasses that sit on my nose. I feel a cool breeze rustle against my coat. I am cold and warm all at once. The sun shines through the fog, casting the shadow of a tree whose roots know no end. At the entrance to the forest, I stand frozen in time and space. I can't see what's ahead of me or behind me, only what is. And what is suddenly transforms into what could be. I see a fork in the pathway in front of me. The noise is so loud. Crickets and owls and tigers, oh my. My thoughts scream even louder. I can't hear myself think through the sounds of the forest of my mind. Off in the distance, I see a figure. It's a shadow figure. It's my mother. She's walking towards me. I take a step into the forest, fearlessly ready to confront any overwhelming obstacle that comes my way. When I was a child, I used to play in the forest behind my house, until one day when I caught my mom sneaking a cigarette outside. She tried to hide it behind her back, but I could see the smoke trailing over her head like a snail. I didn't know what to do, so I ran farther into the forest. I'm used to being disappointed by her. I ran and ran and ran until I tripped over a tree branch that fell in the storm the week before. I laid on the cold, hard ground. The back of me was soaked. When I turned into my mom, after that, I decided to turn back. The cold was encroaching. I got home and saw my mom in the kitchen. We agreed not to speak of what I saw. While taking a history test, I looked around at my classmates. The gray desk was cold against my skin. I started counting the people around me, noting those who I knew well and those I had never really talked to. I looked at all the expensive backpacks and shoes. After our test, I asked the person next to me how she thought she did. She said it was a difficult test, and I agreed. Every class period, we'd talk more and more. We became friends. We started hanging out with another friend from biology class. We were inseparable, like three peas in a pod. We'd study together and hang out together and dance. They were the best friends I ever had. We liked to play soccer after school and sing loudly to music in my room. But one day it all stopped. They both stopped talking to me. It was like I had been yanked out of the forest and thrown to the forest floor. I became moss, the owls pecking at my spiky green tendrils. They found two other friends, and I sat alone at my desk in history again. It was like another test, but this time a history of my own. Things went on like this for years. Over and over, I got put back into the forest. My friends who I thought were my friends actually were just drama machines. Life is foggy when you don't know what's going on, and I live in a forest that's always foggy. Try as I might to find myself, it's easy to get lost in all the trails and hills. I'm climbing a mountain each and every day, but I keep going back into the forest, looking for answers. All right. So, what do you think the writer did well? Let's start with that. Can we hear from Floral Park or Ozone Park? Jackson Heights, feel free to participate too.
Okay, tell me which one to write. Oh. Do you guys, everybody hears me over there?
Yeah, I can hear
Okay,
you.
Team Ozone Park wants to go.
Sorry, are you speaking? I can't hear you.
So we'll come a little closer. Apologies
The
about
writer, the writer stuck with the metaphor well. I said that the writer stuck with the metaphor well. Okay. All right, thank you. Anybody else? Anything you think they could improve upon?
I just think that this essay is, it's like hard for me to find out what her character traits are. I just feel like we can see that she's curious and aware of what's going on around her, but I just feel like this essay is, it's like talking about one thing and then jumping to the next, and I don't really see how it like shows her changing. It's just showing her realization of her surroundings, and that's pretty much it.
All right, thank you so much. Go ahead.
Feels like a work of fiction rather than authentic.
Thank you. Anybody else want to participate? Okay, I think these are amazing comments. To start off with, yes, the writer is clearly a really good writer. They use the metaphor well, but maybe a little bit too much. As you guys were saying, for the improvement, there isn't really a cohesive train of thought or flow that you can really follow. It's hard to understand maybe what the point of the personal statement is, especially because, you know, there's a lot of imagery, and the examples kind of feel disconnected. They're just briefly mentioned, especially, you know, the experience with their mom. It was 2 sentences before the writer went back into the forest and everything became kind of vague again. And then, as you were saying, the second example kind of comes out of nowhere, and you also don't really understand what the point of that is. You can see that the writer has been through a lot and is also being very vulnerable in this essay, but you don't really see what they have done to overcome certain things. So for the first example, did they try talking to their mom? What happened after? How does like the experience with their mother connect to the experience with their friends? And for the friends, that could also be a good topic if it was just that topic. But we don't really see if the writer, you know, approached their friends, try to understand what was going on, why they stopped talking to the writer. We don't see the writer take much initiative other than kind of passively observe or experience the different examples that they're going through. So you guys did great. Let's look at what the admissions committee says. So they're saying that the writers know that college essays should be meaningful reflections and exercise in creative writing, but sometimes writers take this advice to the extreme and write essays that are too metaphorical and too focused on internal reflection. This essay is the perfect example of what happens when a writer goes over the top with metaphor. The forest metaphor could be a useful tool given the writer's topic, but as it is now, everything else gets lost within the metaphor. And it's difficult to extract what the writer actually says about their life. Similar to what you guys were saying, that it doesn't feel authentic. It feels more like a work of fiction. So the writer's reflection is also deep and removed from specific examples. After reading the essay, they still don't feel like they know the writer. The topic also changes halfway through the essay, so following the thread throughout is challenging. Again, something that you guys noticed. So what this essay does well, according to the admissions officer, it's clear that the topics are both meaningful to the writer, and they think that the first topic, especially, maybe still grounds for a great college essay, and the writer is being vulnerable, and they're willing to share an important part of themselves. But what they could improve upon is picking a main topic and sticking with it. And then using the metaphor sparingly. They mentioned the bookend technique where you introduce the metaphor in the beginning, your introduction, and then return to it at the end. So the bulk of your essay should be concrete, should show the writer through examples in your own life, in the real world. And then they recommend tidying up each paragraph. So reflecting on the purpose of each paragraph. How does it connect to the rest of your personal statement? What the point is for that paragraph? That's really important. Okay, so let's go back to the presentation. All right. Common mistakes. Grammar errors are common mistakes seen by admissions officers. This is where it becomes really important to have someone else proofread your personal statement before you submit it. If you're reading it many times, it's easy to overlook different things or small mistakes. One thing I'd recommend is reading it out loud. That can help you catch mistakes, but the best thing you could do is have a trusted friend, family member, advisor look over your essay. All right, and then reviewing and editing. Again, this comes back to having someone else look over your essay. Have them maybe write down what they think the message of your essay is, what they understand about you as a writer through the essay, what qualities they glean from it, and see if it really aligns with what you wanted to express through your essay. And that will kind of tell you or give you an idea of whether you were successful in executing your plan properly. Okay, and also avoid having too many people review your essay because too many opinions can kind of take away from your authenticity and they can also conflict with each other. But at the end of the day, it's your choice how you want to present your essay. For example, if you have specific grammar style that you use, for example, that is your choice, even if someone who's reviewing it might not like shorter sentences. We have one more case study, but I don't want to take up too much time since we also have to go through the supplemental slides. But this is just another essay, and this was sourced from Johns Hopkins University. You can find this online, and you can also find the admissions comments that JHU wrote underneath. And this was an example of a great essay that helped them get into the college. I would recommend, however, not looking at other personal statements online before you kind of know what exactly you're writing, before you have yours drafted out, at least the first or second draft, because it can influence what your direction is. If you're looking at somebody else's before you even write your own, it can take away from your authenticity. All right, so key takeaway, take your time. It's still July, almost August, but you have a lot of time to go through all these steps to brainstorm, go through all the drafts, and then the revision process. It can be a little overwhelming, but set those deadlines for yourself. For example, by next week, you should brainstorm like at least 3 or 4 different ideas. And then the following week, pick one and write a first draft. If you give yourself those smaller deadlines, it can become more manageable. All right, let's go to Q&A and then we'll move on to the next presentation. Any questions? We can also come back if you have questions at the end of the presentation. So I can share the Sabiha's PowerPoint now. All right, someone asked, what if I didn't have any ideas? It's kind of hard to start off the process and be a little bit overwhelmed with what to write about, like picking one moment from your life that is significant enough to put in your personal statement. But this is where all of the reflection exercises come in. You don't have to start off with any ideas. Think about what exactly you want the admissions committee to get from your essay, whether, you're a compassionate individual, you're very intellectually curious, you have a mission to tackle cancer survival, whatever it is. Think about what you really value, and then from there you can start pinpointing different experiences that you might be able to talk about. I will share Ms. Sabiha's presentation and then just hold off on the questions and we'll come back to it at the end. Let me know if you can't hear.
Hello everyone, my name is Sabiha Amin and today I will be presenting to you about the essay topic of supplemental essays. So for those of you who weren't present at our last community workshop in which we presented about admission requirements and application timeline, I can quickly introduce who I am. So I am one of the college admission counselors here along with Sabia, who just spoke to you about personal statements. Just some background about me. I just graduated from Stuyvesant High School this past June, and I will be attending Harvard College as a human developmental and regenerative major, possibly under the pre-med track. So that's enough about me, but today we're really going to hone in on the importance of supplemental essays. Even though they are small essays that are often required by elite institutions, they can play a very important aspect of your application, especially with holistic admissions becoming really, really prevalent. So let's deep dive into it. So why are supplemental essays important in the first place? So one, it's an opportunity for you to show your interests, unique attributes, and talents. So we want to learn about you as a person. So we just talked about the Common App, and that's a great way to showcase some of your interests and attributes. But here's where you can talk about something less in depth, but more so you still find just as important to showcase some aspect about yourself, some unique personality trait, or something that you think college admissions officers would thoroughly enjoy to learn about you. Second, reveal anything that can't be found anywhere else in your application. So we don't need a whole reiteration of your stats that can speak to yourself on paper. Many of you might have great awards, that's great, but the point of a supplemental essay is know of you as like a human, literally. What is your personality like? What are you interested in? How do you see yourself in the future? Things like that.
Thank you. I ask you to put, I'm gonna ask you to give out today's, you can pause the recording or whatever, we'll edit it later. We are doing the Google reviews again. If you have 3 Google reviews submitted with 5-star reviews and you spot your name 3 times, there's different centers. We will include 1 round of a pre-college essay review for you. It's all free. So all we ask right now is 10 minutes. Give us a 5-star Google review with the code. And if you have 3 by the time we finish all the free college workshops, then we can hopefully support you more. We're not asking for a single dime. We're just asking for your recommendations, for your experiences, and that way we can continue getting you all of this to you for free. 15-minute break, 10-minute break, and then we're going to continue with the supplemental essays. Every single student, please work with your parent to submit those. This will help us continue our growth. We have students at New York City. We have students in Long Island. We have students in Queens. And hopefully soon we'll be back to some of our prior locations. So we'll take 10 minutes. You have a timer, Mr. Kazi? We'll got a 10-minute timer, and then we're monitoring how many are coming up. Please wrap it up. We're going to start announcing all the successful ones come in. You guys have fun? Pick it up. It's all for free. And this goes 2 ways, okay? We got, I know you're here for SAT, so we want to make sure we're able to cover each other, got your back, and you guys have powers. You all.
They can highlight how you are a good candidate for a particular school and set you apart from other applicants. So I can give an example as, let's say you're applying to Columbia. Columbia has a great focus on core curriculum and having a very good overall overview of education. So even if you're interested in the science, the whole point is core curriculum, get exposed to other fields, including mathematics, including the humanities field, and kind of understand how can we coincide all of these aspects within your educational route. So you as a candidate, what you have to do is why having that multidisciplinary coveted education is very important to you and your own interests. How can that advance your own learning, right? So if you want to do research, how can having these literature skills from these other courses that you do improve your own like scientific path that you want to take? Another school or another way you can represent you're a good candidate for a particular school would be through Brown, which is also an Ivy League institution. Brown's whole mission statement is to have the open curriculum. So the main idea with the open curriculum is you get to choose what classes you take, what academic journey you want to have for yourself. So if you want to explore multidisciplinary fields, that's great. If you want to create a unique path for yourself academically, that's what Brown can provide. So your goal in like your supplemental essays is showcase that. How are you going to take initiative within your education path, and how can Brown act as a supplement for you to do so? So it's really revolves around you and how you utilize these particular resources. The last like general reason why supplemental essays are important is they can be just as important as your personal statement. I think there's a huge myth regarding supplemental essays is, oh, they're supplemental, you know, you don't really have to focus on them as much as your Common App. But I think, and I know for a fact, with holistic admissions becoming highly prevalent because of the increase in applications and lower acceptance rates every year, they can play a very important role within your application, right? Even if you don't have great stats, looking at supplementals can also help improve your chances because they can speak to your character. What are you like? What initiatives do you take? How can you have an impact on their school environment and making them for yourself? How that's like very, very important for a school. And that's why supplementals have just become even more coveted within the application process. So what are some of the types of supplementary essays that you can come across? So here's a general overview of specific types or categories of supplemental essays you can come across, but there are outliers of different forms of essays, so be aware of that. It really depends school for school. So here are 6 categories. One, we have the why us. So why do you want to go to their specific school? This kind of talks about what I was talking about with Brown and Columbia. Second, why major? So if you want to major in CS, for instance, why do you want to major in CS? What urged you to, and what do you want to do with it in the future? Extracurricular essay. So this is normally just expanding on an extracurricular you mentioned on your Common App or something even outside of it. So let's say you had a lot of extracurriculars and there was one that you couldn't highlight in your application, you could maybe talk about it here, things like that that you think are important for college admission officers to know. The community essay is more so how you've impacted community or how has community impacted you and who you are as a person. The intellectual essay is generally like a way in which we can get to know your thinking process, so that's a bit more complicated. And then the 6th idea is the quirky imaginative essay. So these can get very, very creative and require some thought, so we'll get into it, so don't worry. Okay, so now we're going to break down each of these types of essays. So first is the why us essay. The aim is demonstrate why you are a great fit for that particular school using specific examples. So how exactly? Research specific classes, programs, ECs, and communities that align with your passions and interests. So if you look in the slide, we gave some example questions. So what is it about Yale that has led you to apply? That's of course offered by Yale University. Which aspects of the Tufts undergraduate experience prompts your application? In short, why Tufts? That's why we have why us as like the general essay topic. Now, for this essay, the best thing that we can recommend for you is to research and research. And not just state, okay, here's what's great about Yale, or here's what great is about Tufts. You guys have great science classes, you have great this, you have great that. Like, they know that. They're an elite institution for a reason. So they know they have great resources. But why are these specific classes, programs, ECs important to you and what you're interested in? So for context, like for me, I applied to Yale University and I was admitted. So when I answered this question, I kind of talked about how I learned about Yale a little bit. So I learned it about a third professor who sadly passed away, but his name is John Merriman, and he taught at Yale, and I was introduced to their open courses, and that showed me the ideals of what Yale shares, which is commonalities and sharing knowledge. Because the whole idea of an open class, it's very seminar based. You get to talk to others and it connects with the audience for free, and it kind of showcases that idea that knowledge is not limited and how we're constantly working with others and collaborating with others. And I kind of talked about how I want that in a scientific environment. So that's very specific to what I want in my scientific path, how I was introduced that to Yale. And then I talked about some classes that they had that same collaborative environment, some communities that was really important to me. So I talked about their Islamic society there, or things like that kind of invoked my interest. Even research opportunities is very common. So look into that. A lot of research is required for the YSSA, and you might think you can utilize a template, but what we highly suggest is be unique to each school. Each school, you need to do a lot of in-depth research and find ways to frame your interests. Having a template might not be as authentic of a feel for each individual school. So what are some common mistakes? writing about the school size, location, reputation, weather, ranking. It's pretty obvious we shouldn't do that. Misusing names of teams, mascots, representative figures. So if you have classes in there, you have a specific sports team, make sure you're saying the right name. Parroting the brochures or website language, like things they already know. And thinking of this as a why them essay. So this goes back to the point I was talking about, like, oh, they're already elite institution. Why am I constantly just repeating how great they are? Like, they know how great they are. That's not the inherent point of the YS. So just 3 general tips. Do your research, as I reiterated several times already. Always connect back to yourself. They want to know you are the centerpiece of all your supplementary pieces. You just need to utilize your resources correctly. And 3, be specific, right? Don't be general. I really like your science classes. No, be specific. What are some great specific minded science classes that they have? Maybe about like organic chemistry, if that's a field you're interested in, or microorganisms. I'm just naming science things because that's what comes off the top of my head, but be specific according to your interests. Next, we're going to talk about a case study. So I'll read it quickly. So Natasha is planning on applying restrictive early action to Yale University, and she wants to start writing her supplementals, which are due in about a month. One of the questions that is asked every year is, what is it about Yale that has led you to apply? As someone with sharp interest in psychology and has engaged in many environmental activism projects during high school, she wants to display how she has continued interest in pursuing the same activities. How should Natasha go about writing the Why Yale essay? What specific things should she research about the school? So even though I'm not there live, Sadia or whoever's.
Okay. So, what do you guys think? How can Natasha go about writing the YEL essay? We haven't heard from Floral Park. Does anyone from Floral Park want to participate? If not, does anyone from Jackson Heights or Ozone Park? There are no wrong answers. What would you do if you were writing the Why Yale essay?
Volunteers.
Were they pausing
Okay.
for some? They're
Yeah,
asking questions?
for the case study.
Yeah.
I know we have a good job. Keep it up. Go ahead.
Okay, so we'll just let Ms. Sabiha answer. But please participate from next time.
Currently here can pause the video and take some time to turn and talk with whoever's next to you and kind of draft some of these ideas of how can Natasha go about writing her YL essay. So take a few minutes and Sadia and Ivan will go around picking and choosing, calling some people to help out.
All right, we can do that too. Maybe take 2 minutes to talk to whoever's next to you, and then we'll come back and share. That might make it easier. So write down what would you do if you're writing the Why Yale essay or why whatever college essay. How would you go about making a really well thought out, specific supplemental? Feel free to participate whenever you're ready.
Maybe we can talk about how her experience in environmental activism and her heavy interest in psychology. She could look into Yale's website and look at the classes they offer and the programs and extracurriculars and see if they align with psychology and environmental activism, and then she can like make herself appealing, and through her supplements, through talking about her persistence in those activities.
Yeah, thank you so much for participating. I think you just hit like one of the main points. Honestly, like the why us, like why this college essay is always, it's not always about why that college, it's about why you are great for that college too. So you need to always tie it back to yourself, no matter, like, don't spend too much time talking about just the school. Talk about how it connects back to you. And she could also look into, aside from classes, she could look into any student organizations that are pretty specific to Yale, and how, you know, she might contribute to that community side as well. But let's hear from Ms. Sabiha.
All right. Hope you guys had some great brainstorming moments by sharing out. And thank you to those who did share out. So what can she do? A huge thing is finding a lot of programs that are available within the school that has the environmental activism projects that she's interested in, psychology. So maybe finding programs that incorporate psychology and environmental activism into one specific major, or maybe dual majoring there. And an important thing is finding specific like research opportunities, which is very actively available in terms of psychology. There are a lot of labs that have those opportunities. Activism, what are some projects that already exist? What are some organizations that exist on campus that would follow through with her own interests? And also, how can she kind of explore both of these fields together at Yale? Does she have the flexibility to do so? What are some courses that really emphasize both of these ideas? These are all things she can put together within an essay to kind of talk about her interests. So being specific, finding those classes, finding those programs, just like we just discussed. All right, so here is a sample response to the general like why Yale essay. And this applies with the same idea of they're interested in psychology, and possibly like environmentalism. So I will read it out loud and you guys can think of some ideas like how you feel about this essay. So, coin collector and swimmer, Hungarian and Romanian, critical and creative thinker, I was drawn to Yale because they don't limit one's mind with or, but rather embrace unison with and. Wandering through the Beinecke Library, I prepare for my multidisciplinary energy studies capstone about the correlation between hedonism and climate change, making it my goal to find implications in environmental sociology. Under the tutelage of Assistant Professor Ariel Baskin-Summers, I explore the emotional deficits of depression, utilizing neuroimaging to scrutinize my favorite branch of psychology, human perception. At Walden Peer Counseling, I've integrated my peer support and active listening skills to foster an empathetic environment for the Yale community. Combining my interest in psychological and environmental studies is why I'm proud to be a Bulldog. So let's go over some things they did amazing here, because this is a great example of what they're looking for in a why Yale. One, from the start, we get some things that talk about who she is as a person, right? Her identity, so Hungarian and Romanian, things she's interested in, coin collector and also a swimmer. And she kind of draws like this idea of kind of combining your interest is very important to Yale and Yale's mission to incorporate and. So you already, from the get-go, you get their interests, Yale's interests combined together and how they work coincidentally. Now, this is where we get vivid imagery of what are some things she's interested in. So she pinpoints Beinecke Library, which is a library that's within Yale University. And she goes into the capstone class that is offered by them, which focuses on energy studies, environmental sociology. It's a thing she's interested in, showing, and not just like dropping the name of the class, but also specifically talking about what does the class have to offer. Then we also have research that she can do with Professor Ariella Baskin-Summers on psychology and a specific branch of it. And then we go into a little bit about the community aspect, why peer counseling is important to her and what Yale has to offer for that. And she ends it off with being why she's proud to be a bulldog. Bulldog, if you didn't know, is the mascot of Yale. So she clearly understands Yale. She clearly knows what she's interested in and how Yale can offer that. And this is a perfect example that kind of does that. But yeah, I think if you want, you can maybe expand on less of the classes, more in the community if that's important to you. And that like ratio is really depends on you and your interests. So don't be hesitant to explore. All right. So we're going to walk into the next type of essays, which is why major. Aim is to reflect on why you're interested in your selected major and field of interest, and you want to show how you expressed interest before, like if you are interested in engineering, like, oh, you like building things, we can incorporate that, like how that was the starting point. And then talk about how you expressed your interest in high school. What are some things you explored and how do you plan on engaging in at their school? So that can be referring back to the school and what are some programs they have to offer. So if you didn't mention it in your YS already, you can mention your Y major, or you can divide it. In your YS, you talk more about community, while in Y major, you talk about a little bit about what the school has to offer for you academically to kind of engage in your interest and field a major. So an example question is, please tell us what from your current and past experiences attracts you specifically to the areas of study that you noted in the application. So just like I talked about, to give me a little bit of the past, the present, and the future. All right, next we're gonna do a little case study in which you read a sample writing of the prompt that I just read regarding Columbia University. So to refer to a case study, here we go. This is 197 words from the 200-word word count. So we can read it together. So I hope to double major in neuroscience in behavior and film and media studies at Columbia. Though I may eventually attend medical school, I want to use the liberal arts curriculum at Columbia to explore multiple disciplines as an undergraduate. The combination of neuroscience and film studies might seem surprising to some, but together they pay attribute to the reason I love science at all. My elementary and middle schools didn't have strong STEM programs, and so my teachers, seeing a student enthusiastic about science, used to put on science documentaries when I'd finish the homework. Watching Stephen Hawking, Oliver Sacks, and Neil deGrasse Tyson, I discovered things that couldn't have reached me from the textbook. At Columbia, I hope to take both courses that prepare me for a career in neuroscience while also learning documentary filmmaking and production. I have to intern at least one summer at a production company specializing in science documentaries and to do a senior project that might eventually see screen time. Whether or not I go on to make films as a career, I know that learning how to communicate complicated ideas to the public will serve me well as a scientist. So that was a lot to unpack, but what do you think they did well within the supplemental essays? What are things they could have expanded on? And just general things that they could have improved. So take some time. Whoever's in control of this video right now, feel free to pause this video and give them time to turn and talk and kind of share out their ideas with us. So feel free to.
Okay.
All right, everyone, we've got a quick pause. I know we're all exhausted.
Work experiences, that's from Harvard University. Please provide more details on your most meaningful commitment outside of the classroom while in high school and explain why it was meaningful. That's from the University of Florida. So this is pretty straightforward of an essay, but the whole idea is you don't want to list a bunch of things you did, but more so maybe pinpoint a specific memory from it in which, let's say you were hosting an event for a specific organization, specific club, and how exactly you made an impact, or just talk about a memorable moment that you had with that extracurricular and how that's kind of impacted you and what you want to do. So some possible topics: an activity in which you held an active leadership role, an activity you were really committed to in terms of time and involvement, an activity which is meaningful, one that reflects your heritage or a challenge you or a family member faced, an activity that relates to your future goals, an activity that is meaningful to you, but you were not able to share in another part of your application. General tips: 1, show and do. Don't tell us what you did. Number 2, quantify and highlight impact. So you don't want to state just what happened, but how has that impacted in your long run? How has that impacted the environment around you? And of course, connect back to yourself. That's a common trend we see with all essays. Next, the community essay. So the aim here is to show how you can contribute to the college's diverse and inclusive environment. Describe your own experience with a particular community and refer back to how you might implement it at their college. So if you have an organization or if there's a club that you're currently part of that you think has played an important role to who you are. So for example, for me, MSA at Stuyvesant High School was great to me and it really showed me community. I kind of want to continue that in college and how I would want to take involvement with that community and kind of expand on that idea. That's a great way to do it, but also exploring new communities is a great way to kind of refer back to it. So here's a sample question. Everyone belongs to many different communities and or groups defined by shared geography, religion, ethnicity, income, cuisine, interests, race, ideology, or intellectual heritage. Choose one of the communities to which you belong and describe that community and your place within it. So you have so many options to choose from. A community doesn't necessarily have to be like community service or just one specific typical community. It can be something that's very unique to you. So, or like just unconventional, I would say. So a fan club, a social media platform that you often engage with in which people comment and talk about their interests, a crocheting community, a crocheting club, that can be a very important community to you and speaks to who you are as a person. So don't be afraid to kind of explore that than what you would typically describe as just basic version of community. And yeah, hitting hone on the misconception that just because they're talking about community, that doesn't mean you need to do community service necessarily, right? You can talk about it, like there's nothing saying you can't, but don't think that's like a restriction, because you can talk about community in any terms and its impact is not valued on the amount of hours you spent on it, but more so what is the qualitative impacts it had on you. So make sure to kind of phrase that correctly. Now, the intellectual essay. So this isn't very common, but you can see sometimes. So the aim is to display intellectual thinking process and how you share knowledge with others. How exactly do you do that? Refer to your interests and passions to help understand how you spark your intellectual curiosity. So how are you exploring your interests? How would you engage in possibly an intellectual debate about a topic? How have you engaged in intellectual debate? And if you haven't done debate in high school, that's okay. You can still debate outside of that, such as having a disagreement and you kind of express your side of things and your thinking process. That is considered an intellectual debate from a day-to-day basis. So an example question would be, tell us about something that really sparks your intellectual curiosity and compels you to explore more. It could be an idea, book, project, cultural activity, works of art, startup, music, movie, research, innovation, question, or other pursuit. So they just list a bunch of possible intellectual curiosity ideas. And this is one from University of Washington, but this is offered from a lot of schools. So biggest tip, be unique. Guiding question, what are some hobbies and passions you've taken on recently? Well, how do you go about doing a certain activity? So describe your thoughts while playing a video game. Something as simple as that can take a long time to process, and how exactly do you kind of activate your brain to think that way? It definitely requires more reflection than you would expect, but you can definitely extrapolate your ideas. And third, how can you show off your personality? So if you're a little quirky, you can describe that through your thinking process, and a little bit more of the sillier side of you. That's totally fine, because they want to see your personality in a more like an informal setting. Every person has their own way of processing things, and this is the way you can highlight it. So it's very unique to you, and it's quite easy to make it about yourself. You just have to frame it correctly and word it correctly. And of course, don't be scared to experiment with your writing style as well. Now, the quirky and imaginative essay. This is very, very rare, I would say, but it does appear for some schools, especially UChicago is common for it, to display how uniquely creative and thought-provoking you are, which are essential to a college's innovative environment. Show off your personality by being unequivocally yourself. Use that to come up with distinct ideas. So to showcase how quirky they can be, here's an example question. Cats have 9 lives. Pac-Man has 3 lives, and radioactive isotopes have half-lives. How many lives does something else, conceptual or actual, have, and why? They get inspired by students every year, and they have like different lengths. So this one is 2 pages. But you can see that is very, very much a philosophical question and something that is hard to expand on. So take your time with writing these essays, which is why you need to give yourself time to write these essays. And think of something, try to think outside the box, and definitely take your time to draft it out, and take inspiration from the environment around you. Okay, now how do we approach the writing process itself? So one way is the narrative approach, which is known as the Elon Musk exercise. So what exactly is it?
Recognize everyone's energy level. I'd like to call some of the branch leaders back. Hey, leaders. All right, so students and parents, raise your hand if you want us to soldier through the last 7 minutes. Thought so. We had a long day of diagnostic. Did you folks have your diagnostic today? So that explains why we're so tired. We apologize greatly for having these overlap with your diagnostic days. But in the summer, we don't have too many opportunities to meet this way. We only have 8 weeks that we're going to be meeting this way. So we will make sure that our recording includes the final part of the narrative approach. We'll also follow up by including that portion of the recording to be played at your SAT classes next week. Tomorrow is going to be the review. We really, really want to thank you all for your time. Please take those packets home. We don't want you working so hard for an SAT score above 1450, 1500, 1550, and undermatched for college. So please get some rest, go home, hydrate. There's pizza left. There's 2 slices of pizza left. So please come on over. Thank you, everyone.
Should I continue playing the video for the recording?
No.
Important.